Accessibility in the KB.
Perfect. So welcome everyone to Accessibility in the KB with Dana Gerber-Margie. There will be time at the end for QA, so feel free to, in the chat, leave any questions that you have. Also, during that portion of QA at the end, you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask your questions there. So as a quick introduction of Dana, Dana is the Do It Help Desk Documentation Lead, not league, and has been in that position since 2022. And we're really looking forward to hearing all about accessibility in the KB. So let's turn the time over to Dana.
Text. Simple but powerful tips for more accessible documents.
Thank you so much, David. All right. So this is okay, but the name's actually Dana. Close though. Donna happens all the time, but Dana. So my name is Dana. And I'm going to present today on accessibility, specifically in the KB or the KnowledgeBase site.
Woman with glasses.
So if you want, go ahead and share in the comments which KB docs or which KB sites that you own. And just so you know, there will be resources at the end. And then also, I'm happy to always talk to you afterwards or 6 months down the line about your KB, about accessibility, about anything you would like. And again, like David said, if you have questions during the session, feel free to reach out in the chat there.
Accessibility at UW-Madison.
All right. So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about accessibility at UW-Madison. And in generally, actually, the whole country. So in 2024, there was a new final rule on Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it required state and local governments to ensure services, programs, and activities were accessible to all. And then that was, the final rule was focusing on, sorry, now my screen's just, they're flashing. I don't know, I don't think you can see it.
Text. Title II of ADA.
It always happens when my computer gets overloaded. Sorry about that.
You're good for us.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
The monitors, the separate monitors start flashing black, but I don't think that should be seen. Anyway, moving on. So the new final rule, which was announced in 2024, includes web content and mobile apps. At the time, it was for April 2026 for these public entities that had more than 50,000 constituents. Now they've actually moved it since April 2027. And I gave this presentation actually just to a modified early version of this presentation to my small team. So when I had given this presentation last year, it was still April 2026, but now we have an extra year. And essentially it's that all of our content, especially our external content, needs to follow WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2.1 level AA. This is the federal technical standard.
Text. Digital accessibility at UW-Madison. Why?
All right, so specifically instead of federal, let's talk about digital accessibility at UW-Madison. I haven't gotten personally a lot of pushback from people I talk to about this or in my division, but sometimes there's a little bit just because it does add another layer of work sometimes. So these are the reasons why we do provide accessibility to our content. Besides it being the law, which is the first reason. Second one, it improves the end user experience, usually for all, almost all the time for all. It improves your services and your support. So I like to think of it that like if you have a great KB document that is accessible to all or as many as possible, that means they're probably not going to contact you because they've answered their question already. It improves, improves your services and support. And something I really like to highlight is it's not just for a small group. You'll notice that I'm wearing glasses. this is a visual aid. This improves my life to have these glasses. Most of us, a lot of us, as we age, the things on the screen get smaller and smaller, it feels like, and we need to increase it. So I definitely, even though I'm not 40 yet, I have, just like my parents, zoomed in on my screen to make the text bigger. So I like to think of it, it's not just that this is a small group that needs high-tech things that we don't understand. It's almost always all of us. And we are always closer to a disability or a visual impairment than we think. And then lastly, it's just the right thing to do, especially since we're in higher education at a public university.
Text. Accessibility in the KB.
So specifically what I have, what this presentation focuses on is accessibility in the KB itself. So I'm not going to give you the entire song and dance, which is very important and comes especially from the Center for User Experience, but about digital accessibility in all venues of documentation, are ways to show documentation through like using the UW theme 2.0 or other methods. I'm specifically talking about in the KB, kb.wis.edu. Again, if you want to share any KB sites that you manage, I'm happy to hear about them. I should also add, I am not on the KB team. So I'm in Do It. I'm on the Do It Help Desk KB site. And I'm essentially like a super user just because the help desk is so big as a KB. And it was the first KB. But like I just attended at 11 to 12, the KB team, Wei Zhang Wang and Matt Goins, they just had an advisory meeting and they talk about the development that they do. So what I'm about to share comes from my experience being the administrator and the documentation lead for the Do It Help Desk KB, and just generally what I have discovered.
Tiny MCE in the KB editor.
So first off, there's Tiny MCE inside of the KB editor.
Don't ignore it.
Tiny MCE is basically the vendor chosen to do the accessibility checks. You can kind of think of it like how the university recently procured Grackle for Google Doc workspaces that kind of checks your accessibility for you. So Tiny MCE is the editor, or is the accessibility checker in the KB editor. Through my time here, editing past documents and editing current documents, helping people with their documents and training my student staff, these are the highlights of the most common errors that I found. And I'm going to go through one by one. Incorrect heading order, images missing alt text, colors without enough high contrast, and then just, it says different things about tables, but just tables, period, just errors. And I'll go through it.
Text. Headings.
So for headings, this is how you organize information. There are heading numbers, and those would look like the top title of any document in a KB is always going to be heading 1. So that looks like the biggest. And then the next one would be heading 2. So what I have noticed is that often people will start to edit a document and they don't always know what to highlight. I'm not always sure what's happening there, but I think they often pick heading 3 because it looks right. It like heading 2 will look too big, but you need to do heading 2. So the document title is 1, and then underneath is heading 2. I do have here that after 5 subheadings, you need to reconsider your formatting and your life choices. Generally, at that point, it might be that your documentation or your information you're trying to display is getting too convoluted.
Text. Heading 1 embroidery stitches.
My example is embroidery stitches. I have a picture there of an embroidery from one of my favorite shows. It's Fox Mulder looking at a cat, thinking that the cat might be alien or a shapeshifter, and someone else loved this scene and made it into an embroidery. And to do embroidery, which is one of my hobbies, you have to know different stitches. So in this example, heading 1 in this document would be the title, embroidery stitches.
Headings 2 and 3.
And then you can see I have a subsection for basic stitches that you should know, like back stitch or straight stitch. And then specialty stitches, if you're a little bit more advanced, like the French knot or satin stitch or so on. In this one, I think they're mostly using a satin stitch and back stitch probably in this picture.
Text, images.
Secondly, we have images. Personally, in my day-to-day, we work in tech. I typically avoid images if I can help it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about screenshots in a second too. So really, if I'm using images, it's almost definitely going to be a screenshot. But when I take screenshots of things, especially something like Zoom, what we're using here, or Google Docs, or really any of the services that we use, especially vendors we use, the tech changes extremely rapidly. So unless it's a document that is widely used and circulated and reviewed very often, I hesitate to include a screenshot that clearly conveys a specific layout because it changes so rapidly. It means that there's a lot of ongoing maintenance. If you do have images there that you're always kind of checking to see if something has changed. And also when you use no images, you don't have to think about alt text. And when you use no images or less images, you have easier image management.
All text descriptive and 1 sentence long.
But the biggest thing with images is almost always you'll get an error that alt text is not there. It is required. It should be descriptive and not stuffed with just keywords. It should be like a descriptive sentence explaining, something like woman with glasses, something like that. It should be describing what you are seeing and the meaning and the purpose of it. There is also, though, if there isn't really much of a meaning or a purpose besides it's pretty, there is an option to say for decorative use only. And then that will be something that's an add-on for visual people and doesn't need to be seen by the visually impaired.
Text, screenshots.
A note about screenshots. Alt text does not actually need to be used for screenshots when and only when the steps are written in text. But I would also never recommend that your document, especially if it's external, should just be screenshots here and, boom, boom, boom. I can understand it if you're trying to get something quick and you just want to share with your team, do this, do this, do this. But when you're doing this for the public as a public entity, your steps should be written in text, and then a screenshot would be additional information, additional to the words for visual people. And then you can use the for display purposes only.
Text, how-to and technical guides should not only be screenshots. Links opening.
So I just to show you that I'm not perfect, and I know none of us can be perfect. Setting a link to open in a new tab is probably my toxic inaccessibility trait. I work with help desk agents, and I have found that typically help desk agents and internet savvy users prefer links to open in new tabs, or they tend to do it on their own. And, we all kind of joke about how you should look at my screen because the tabs are insane. I think that's because we have all this, we all have this habit. But an external document that can be really abrupt to folks and to visually impaired folks, where they get sent somewhere and they didn't know that they were going there. So it can be disorienting, especially for someone with little technical experience. And remember, this law is about your constituents in local and state government. So that includes everyone, not just us tech users or university educated folks. But yeah, it can be disorienting, especially with no warning. So if you do have a link, it should open in the same tab, or if you open it in a new tab, you should warn users that a link will open in a new tab. And I'll link this later in the same tab, I guess. But they're in the digital accessibility at UW-Madison. There's good scripts for how that should look on your document.
Text. Links. Use link doc feature. Do not use long URLs.
In the KB, just as a note, there's a great link doc feature that I'll show you in a second that you should really use. It's just great. It makes it so that the ecosystem is truly connected. It's also dynamically updates. So if you link to a document and the title changes, the other site or the other document changes, it changes automatically in your link. It's great. Do not use long URLs. The links should be titled. And that partly is if a person using a screen reader is getting it read out to them, it will link and read the entire URL. Also, this is a little bit smaller, but just for ableist language, I like to avoid see here and instead use refer to.
Text. Tables, the most complex. Visual representation of data.
Tables. This is probably where I get the most gripes and gruffs and grumblings. They are the most complex. It is a visual representation of data, or at least it should be a visual representation of data that connects to each other. Often people use tables, though, to sub in for, like, they'll use like one cell to change the background or kind of just to like add some pizzazz. But the screen readers, they translate these tables through the HTML, and those using screen readers will struggle with especially complex tables.
Text. Improving representation of data.
Just as an example, first, before I do this, I'll show you an accessible table should have a caption like this that says example table highlighting caption. So that is, treat that like a caption. And then header cell should be noted, and then there should be scoped out. What this means here is that this is the title of that th scope col is the title of the data that's underneath, and then it's scoped to be got over. See, this is why tables are complex. So the column is scoped. It's telling you that the data titled in there is scoped to that column. Sorry, guys.
Points to row title.
And then this is telling you that this is the title of that data scoped to that row. So the difference between going down and going across.
Text. Consider shorter documents, chunking sections with headings, bullet points.
Instead of tables, when I'm working with people that are grumbling about how many errors they're getting in TinyMCE, I would like you to consider some thoughts.
Use TinyMCE.
Use shorter documents, chunk your sections with those headings that we talked about earlier. Use bullet points and use collapsible panels. Basically, instead of trying to visually show a large amount of data, consider making it a smaller one. And then you can also do a table with a smaller amount of data that isn't so complex, and that will be much easier for you to manage and for a screen reader to manage. TinyMCE is pretty good at finding errors with a table. And if you do get an error, you can press the question mark icon to get more information about how to make it accessible.
Text. Color contrast 3 different reds examples.
All right, next, my staff, you love to use red to note something that is big or important. So color contrasting, when we're thinking about accessibility, we like to think about that not everyone with a screen reader is completely blind. Sometimes it could be that they are low vision and they need something like high contrast. So for example, that is black on white or white on black, but it can also mean choosing the type of red. So I like to show this as an example. Red 1 hurts my eyes. Red 2 and red 3 are fine.
Lighter or darker reds.
And so if you really want crucial information to be seen, it can actually, and you're highlighting something red, it can actually hurt those with low vision to try to see what is so crucial. So in the KB, there are two types of reds, and the darker one still gets your important point across, but it doesn't hurt people's eyes.
Language, a lot of accessibility power in how you write.
And then lastly, I have language. And I loved, Elizabeth Trenta was making pins yesterday at the conference, if you were there on site. And there were some pins about plain language. So that made my heart happy. And so this is not something that's a technical aspect. This is accessibility through language. So I highly recommend the UW-Madison Center for Linguistic Services offers a plain language course. It is free. It is virtual, but you can also do an in-person one. And it is so helpful. And then there's also a plain language group that meets monthly, roughly. They have lunch and learns just around plain language. So even if the technical aspects of what I just went through were too big and too crazy, you can do a lot with your language. And that's doing things like making it simple, avoiding technical jargon, and strongly focusing on the most important takeaways of a document.
Avoids fluff, defines acronyms.
All right. And then if I have a little time, I'd like to show you an example document really quick.
Navigates to editing document page in KB.
So here I'm in the KB, I'm editing, and I have an example document up, and I just wanted to highlight some of the things that I talked to you about today.
Title, keywords, summary, body.
So this is where I'm highlighting right now on the screen. I'm hovering over a stick figure with their arms stuck out. It says accessibility checker. If I press this, it comes up with a lot of errors.
To the left under body.
One of those is you have this image that's repair check-in flowchart. It's titled repair flowchart.png. I do not have, it's not letting me scroll down. That's silly. So right down here is where I could provide the text. So I'm gonna do this.
Zooms out.
So you can see. So if I was right here, I could provide alternatives text.
Under solution.
Flowcharts are an example where this is very difficult to create alt text for and also have in visualized through text. So this is one of those complex documents, kind of like a table, that you might want to revisit. Is this the best way to display this information? I will say most of the time a flowchart is an internal process, but I always like to remind people that just because it's internal doesn't mean that you're not going to someday hire somebody or have someone on your staff right now that would really benefit from using a screen reader. And I definitely, if it was this small, I definitely can't read that. I would have to zoom it out.
Scrolls down an accessibility checker to text resolve.
So we're gonna move down to the next error.
Under support.
You can see that I wrote here, resolve is in bright red text. So what I was mentioning earlier is you can change that. You can go to format, text color, and this darker red, it literally is called dark red versus red, will not set off that error. So if I do this, it no longer is shown.
Closes accessibility checker.
The next error that I got was, you can see this support is heading 2 and or is heading 4. So the tiny MCE is picking up that I just skipped heading 3. So the way to fix that is to change this to heading 3, and I will no longer get that error. So if I press this and I fix that, I have no more accessibility issues detected.
Change user to heading 3 and drop down.
The other thing, I mentioned in links, there's the difference between, for info C, I can change this to display 2026 schedule like that.
Insert edit link.
And then this document for questions, I used this function, and this feature is right in the KB editor. Insert edit KB link doc.
Window pops up.
Oh, it's not gonna. You can see here, it makes the URL doc ID 1. And now if I were to ever change get help from do it to like get help lowercase from do it, for example, that title would just dynamically change.
Table at bottom with columns that spell out why do I do this to myself.
And then down here, lastly, I have an example table for you all. And you can see that I have this row is supposed to be the headers. The reason I'm actually not getting an error right now is because if I show you the source code, and if you are playing with tables, you generally should feel kind of confident in the source code or the HTML. But you can see here that this is showing my table body. And then you can see it says TH style. Scope column.
Hovers over a line of code.
And I believe that's why the KB, the checker is not going off, is because I do have at least one cell scoped out to be the column. The rest of them, you can see the difference here. It just says TD style, but it's not scoped out as the column. All right.
Thank you.
Those are my samples, my examples. And then I do have resources to share in the comments that I'll do it right now. But otherwise, I know we're almost at time, but I do have time for any questions if you have them. Thank you all for being here.
Man with glasses.
Thank you, Dana. As Dana mentioned, we do have a couple minutes for any questions that you might have. And
sorry.
Am I hearing an echo?
Julie V. Johnson.
No, I just
Okay.
had a very quick question here. Does documentation on accessibility standards include sensory sensitivities at all? Autism or related neurodivergence?
In WCAG, that's the standards that we have, that the federal standard is. From what I've used it doesn't specifically call out neurodivergence, but I do think that the things like the color contrasting or, definitely not having flashing stuff is talked about in general. It's just not calling out a specific sensory experience. I do think that like Daniela Peters is here, so she might actually have a better I've seen Daniela in the digital accessibility liaison groups. She might have a better look into that. But I am definitely of the, unless you have a different experience, Julie, I'm definitely of the opinion that applying a lot of these accessibility tips and tricks and things that we focus on can also help with sensory overload, which I get sensory overload. Scott asked,
yes.
Oh, thanks, David. Is accessibility in the KB discussed at the KB user group meetings, and when are those meetings? There's two actually different meetings that you might be thinking of. There's a yearly conference that is happening this year, August 3rd to August 7th, is definitely talked about there. And then there are monthly advisory meetings. Today's meeting was Friday at 11 a.m. And that isn't usually talked about like from a training perspective. It's usually talked like those meetings tend to be changes to the KB, things that you should know about. Sometimes it's like feedback options, that type of thing. So there's not really training sessions there, but there is Generally just a really good group of people who are steadfast in their devotion to documentation. So I really like going to that group every month. And I learned something new that impacts my team and yours actually, Scott, that from that advisory group meeting. So it's good to go. And I can put that link. It's just through the KB team.
We have a couple quick comments, and then we'll wrap up for today. Victor says, I like the built-in accessibility tool in the editor. It helped me fix my docs, my sins, text and color, and of course, tables. Thank you for a great review. And then Daniela said, +1 to what Dana said, WCAG standards for the most part don't explicitly cover sensory considerations, although there is some overlap with guidelines covering color, contrast, and motion. However, it's important to understand the WCAG technical standards are only a baseline to raise the floor for accessibility. There are lots of other accessibility and usability considerations that are best practice, but not necessarily covered under WCAG. And then Dana put a link to the KB advisory group in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Thank you, Dana, for this awesome presentation about some of the accessibility tools that we have access to.
I know. I wish they made the word itself more accessible to say.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in, we have one final round of sessions, and we'll see you there.
Waves.
Bye.